Welcome, everyone. Thank you. We have some extra time, so it gave us a chance. We definitely wanted to make sure that our interpretation is set up. Putting this on. Welcome to CLT Resident Engagement for Long-Term Stewardship. We're excited to have this conversation with you and share some lessons from each other, right? Yes. Okay. I'm gonna kick it off now. Before we just jump into this, I want to make sure y'all know who's here and who I have the pleasure of sharing this space with our presenters today. Again, my name is Jacky Rivera. I'm with the California Community Land Trust Network. And I'm going to remind myself to speak slower. And my official title is the San Joaquin Valley Community Ownership Program Coordinator. Mouthful. Basically, I'm based here in the Valley, supporting organizations here in the Valley that are working on community ownership, from community land trusts to co-ops to whatever model their community is looking into. And I'll pass it on.
My co-team is over there.
Sorry.
We're getting the questions up. Hi, everybody. You can see my name is Shakina Samaya Thomas. I am a resident homeowner along with my husband with the Oakland Community Land Trust. I have been a resident board member almost since we bought our home, and we bought our home 12 years ago next Tuesday. Give it up. Yeah. I am also a resident board member with California CLT Action. And very excited to be here. And I'm not even going to lie, we're here today to learn from all of you. So just saying, be prepared to work.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shania. It's spelled like Yania, but it's pronounced Shania, or at least that's how my mom says it. But either way, it's fine. I am with South Tower CLT here, in Yokutsland, or Fresno, as we say it, so-called Fresno, as we say it now. And me and my family have the first family board seat at the CLT. So either me, my husband, Edgar, our two kids are not voting members, but they're around all the time. So I'm very excited to be here with you all. And like Shakina said, to learn from your experience as well. I'll keep talking.
Hi, everyone. My name's Gabby Nunez. I am Land Stewardship Coordinator at Trust South LA. I've been working for the Land Trust for 7 years now, I think, but stepped into the Land Stewardship role basically during the pandemic. That was really when we realized how much support and we also gained a couple of properties. So yeah, I got involved because I believe that South LA should own South LA. And I'm very happy to be here with you all because, like Shakina said, I want to learn from you all too. So.
Thank you. Before we hear more, I did want to kind of share just our agenda for today, our welcome. We're going to get to hear from our peers here, and really being able also to open up the space with some breakout sessions. We'll have a brief Q&A, so y'all can maybe ask them any particular questions. But then again, really want to learn from you all and have space that we all can share, what you all are doing in your organizations, what's working, what's not working, what new things you guys are looking to try. And then have a report back with one another, maybe a little gallery walk, which will be our posters, and then closing it up. With that, we kind of wanted to share our goals again, being able to walk away with some new ideas based on the exchanges that we have today. We also want to create a compilation of those maybe tools or strategies. This is more like a longer term goal, the second one, right? And the third one is that this is also helping the network's curriculum committee as we planned out the 2026 sessions. Right now, we have at least 3 quarterly ones that are slated for specifically this topic. And so we kind of want today's session to help us guide that. And just a quick overview before we jump into this, just to ground on like why resident engagement and why this conversation and why folks, are so hungry to learn from one another around what's working and what folks are trying is because, again, the values and purpose of CLTs, right, around shared governance. In this case, some of that like legal, I didn't realize my hands on there, legal structures / your membership structure. And also if it's not like a formal membership structure, just how are you engaging your community in your CLT and in that guidance? Again, a quick example here is just the board makeup, which is not everybody, not all CLTs have this one. They might have a different form of a tripartite board or some other form, but again, that is bringing in that community perspective, that community voice for that guidance. So just briefly here, our typical one that we talk about is our tripartite CLT residents, community members, and then stakeholders that are bringing that technical expertise and recognizing obviously that CLTs that are starting up don't have residents, that first one, the CLT residents for a while until they have their first properties, right? And then again, another key purpose and value is stewardship. In this case, sorry, I don't want to be blocking you. In the sense of, how are we taking care of our people, of the people that are living in the buildings, but also of that asset, right? Whether that's a building, whether that's land. And so that is super simplified, but talking about supportive services and then that monitoring and enforcement that's related. I know there's been a lot of financing workshops, for example, and so some of the monitoring and enforcement related maybe to some of those loans or some of those requirements that you have to also do, right? So the first part, again, mainly emphasizing on the people. And so we want, these assets and our people to be living in their communities for as long as they want to live and longer, right? And so we have those these supportive services for being able to keep people housed and stable in their communities. So that can look like financial consulting, counseling, foreclosure prevention, community organizing, and resource pooling. On the monitoring and enforcement side, again, mainly related to the asset. In this case, we'll focus on housing. So the occupancy requirements or the rent and resale restrictions to ensure that that property and that land remains in community hands, right, to our resale restrictions and affordable. Property maintenance, obviously, and the ability to intervene in emergencies. Also want to recognize that in today's conversation, our residents come in many different pathways to a CLT. Maybe they organize their building. Maybe the CLT bought their building and now they're learning about CLTs, crisis. And so just have that in your mind in the sense that, that acknowledgement that folks are engaging with the CLT at different kind of pathways, entry pathways. And lastly, now, get to hear from our peers.
Oh, would you please? Okay. Hi, everybody. I guess I'm going first. That's okay. So before I talk about Oakland a little bit, I want to take a little quick pulse of the room. Raise your hand if you are currently or in the process of becoming a CLT resident. Who in here is a resident besides me and you? Are we it? Okay. Who is a practitioner? You're here wanting to learn about the people you're going to serve. Wow. Oh, I can't wait to hear from you all. Who here are funders? Anybody? Kind of, sort of? Okay. Okay, good. Who's just curious what the hell we're talking about? What the heck? Sorry, I forget we're on video. I gotta watch the adult language. Sorry. I'm a big believer in adult language and adult community. Sorry, I just am. If you were there Wednesday night, you already know that. You heard. So okay. Well, I titled my little notes, and it's not a talk, they're notes, is Community is literally our first name, right, in Community Land Trust. And I recognize that that is English and not Espanol. Sorry, I don't speak Espanol. Sorry. Okay, so who we are, Oakland CLT. For those of you who do not know, I'm not going to name every single person up there. That comes later. But I am going to point out that this was a gathering of residents and board members, resident staff, and staff. So we have, and there's one person there. So I am going to point out a couple of people, a few people. You'll see some of us are here. So on the end, yes. Oh, thank you, Jacky, right there. That is an amazing man who is the chair of our board. His name is Junius Williams, and some of you may have heard of him because he's a legacy. If you haven't, looked him up. The next guy, I'm not going to say his name. He is one of our residents, and I am proud to say, I believe he bought his home before we did or around the same time. He's part of the original crew. And this is the very first time he's ever come to a resident activity. I was very proud of that. New people, the person in the green behind me, that is my lovely husband, Christopher, co-owner. Okay. Behind me and next to him is Shamar, one of our resident board members who had planned to be here and something came up and prevented him from being here. Phoenix Magram is here right now, another resident board member. Shamar and myself and my husband are single family homeowner residents, and Phoenix has the pleasure of being in the first multifamily building that we purchased. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Next to him is Jen, who is our amazing staff CFO, but before she was ever staff, she was a resident. Her family bought their home about a month before we bought ours. And then this lovely lady who, and I'm sorry, I forget her name, she is one of our interpreters that comes to our events to make sure that we are practicing language justice whenever possible. So this was an opportunity for us to gather together. A little bit about us. Yes, go ahead. Thank you. Perfect. We were founded in 2009 in response to the housing foreclosure crisis that was just wreaking havoc on Oakland in particular, devastating our community. We do have a tripartite board that is made up of residents, community organizations, and organization members. Junius, for example, was one of the founding members of the organization. At the time, he was executive director of urban strategies in Oakland, and he has stayed on as he left that particular position to go into private practice consulting, continuing to guide us as a board. So we are very committed to the tripartite structure. And I do recognize, and we'll talk about why CLTs sometimes don't have that, but I would argue if you call yourself a CLT and you have not created space on a board, even if you don't have residents yet, but if you haven't set aside space on a board for resident voices, I would argue that's not a CLT. And I'll tell you why in a minute. In Oakland, our portfolio includes a variety of properties. We started with single family homes. That was always the focus. That was only the focus until the building that Phoenix lives in initially contacted us and said, can you help us? It was going up for sale. And said, can you help us not all become displaced? And then we began to enter into the multi-unit purchase world. Since then, we have purchased, been blessed to be able to secure funding and other resources to have, I think we have 4 multi-unit buildings now. We have some mixed use. His unit is actually a mixed use housing and commercial property. We have some vacant lots that we're trying to develop into farming, and we're looking at what can we do next. We're always kind of working towards what's next. That's all of our properties, apparently. I have not seen this particular map. As you can see, oh, Hey, where did those come from? Good for you, Jackie. As you can see by the map, okay, we are mostly concentrated in the area that is known as Deep East and East Oakland, but we are not exclusive. And really, really important, and why I initially started thinking about this kind of a workshop, is we are what's called a scattered site CLT. We are not clustered. There is nobody who lives together unless they are in a multi-unit building. Okay. So a lot of single family homes, some of these are multi-units. We continue to grow. We are about 150 residents in total, and I think we have just under 50 properties in one form or another, including vacant lots. So that's a little bit about who we are, and what we stand for. I draw our attention. The reason I mentioned the tripartite board, talking about community and recognizing there are some differences. Go ahead and go on, Jackie. Yeah, and I'm going to stay here for a minute. So myself, my husband, our staff, Jen, Phoenix, Shamar, and myself, we got together a few weeks ago. There's a few people missing from this that are equally important. We got together to try and strategize as staff, board, residents, because my husband, he's lovely, but he's not either. Right? We got together to brainstorm a little bit about what does it look like, and that's kind of what this workshop is about. What does it look like for us to build community with our residents? And truth be told, we've kind of been waiting for staff to do that. And we've come to the reality that we say we are community controlled, community driven, community led. That means that we, the residents who are the community and want to build community, maybe we need to step up and help make this happen and not keep relying on staff and staff capacity to make it happen for us. So that was the driving force behind this conversation, and the driving force behind what I wanted to bring to this community and why we are here. So as community controlled and driven and led, that is going to mean that every CLT is going to look a little different, right? Because it is based on the community and the needs of the community. Again, we didn't start off to become a multi-unit type of CLT, multi-unit owning type of CLT. Our community drove that. Our community presented the need, and it became part of our work. But even though there are differences among CLTs, there are commonalities. And the commonalities that say, hey, this is a CLT, number one, first and foremost, is we are looking to create permanently affordable housing, truly affordable housing, permanently. Not for 30 years in LIHTC, not for 55 years, not, until it gets sold by the family that literally put their sweat and tears into building it and then gets to sell it on the open market whenever they're done, right? All important pieces of affordable housing. I'm not saying there isn't a place for them. The CLT movement, the CLT model, in my opinion, is too often missing from the table of those affordable housing conversations. That's why I do this work. Permanently affordable means 99-year renewable ground lease. It means that when my husband and I leave our forever home, whoever comes in next will be able to afford it. And whoever comes in next after that will be able to afford it. And on and on and on and on. That is part of what makes a CLT a CLT. Tripartite board structure, I mentioned that. That's why I say it's community. And it's intentionally including residents in all aspects of the community building. But the question remains, what does it mean to build community? That's why we are here. Because let's be honest, a single family home, especially in a clustered site, is going to look different and have different needs than in scattered sites. We were blessed yesterday, well, I was blessed yesterday to visit South Tower, go on that tour and see what you all are developing with houses literally right next door to each other, board members who live on the same block. That kind of community structure and development already built in is going to look very different than my being the only house in my neighborhood that is part of the CLT. And nobody else around me knows nor cares, right? When possible, when creating CLTs, especially in a multi-unit kind of environment, it's helpful if you can engage the residents before acquiring the property in buying into the values of the CLT. One of the lessons I think we've learned in Oakland is, and this is hard to say, maybe not every property can be saved from displacement. Maybe not every property needs to be bought that comes and seeks help. If the community that lives there is not interested or willing to participate in what the long-term vision and values of the organization are, then maybe that's a hard pass. And that's a hard conversation, right? One we didn't have because we didn't know we needed it, and one that I think as a board, we have to start looking at for future opportunities. So this workshop is really an opportunity for us to talk a little bit, but it's the bulk of the opportunity you see will be for you all to engage in some questions, because we do have challenges and we want to know, you know, from you, pick your brains a little bit on how we can address them. And we'll put that up. And I'm going to shut up now and I'm going to hand this over to Shania. And I will be available for questions as time allows.
Wow. Okay. I have to follow that. So I'm Shania again. And oh, down is forward. Okay. So I am a board member of South Tower CLT, as I had said. This is a picture from our wonderful retreat. Some of the people here are on that picture. And I have been involved for 2 years. And, but a lot of these lovely folks have been, and other people that are pictured have been organizing for much, much longer. For example, for a park that some of you might have seen in one of the tours that you took called Broadway Parque. That was an old police station. Boo, when it got tore down, it was probably going to be up for sale for investors or whoever. And I think Kyle and some neighbors put a sign there that said Broadway Park with a question mark or something like that. Like, could there be a park here? And the neighbors started getting interested. And so then there was a little loophole in terms of offering to buy city-owned land that maybe Kyle can talk about more later, that was taken advantage of for that park to become a community park that's now very beautiful, as some of you might have seen. History here. So in the spirit of having you all talk, and because I am not an expert in this topic, what we see here is a map of redlining in this land that we call Fresno now. And does anyone in the audience would like to give a little bit of an explanation of what redlining is? Like 1 minute. If I know you could have a whole session on redlining, but if you does anybody feel comfortable or want to give a little blurb about what redlining is?
Redlining is the distribution of the lands. It depends on, how they wanted to divide using the discriminatory division. So usually the colored people was going to go and live into the areas that are, with more pollution, the areas that were poor, and the white people was always going to take the best areas of each city. This happened not only over here, but it happens all through California and every single state in the United States. So it got divided, and as always, the colored people was getting, the best, not the best, the areas that we were having not a lot of lands where we could, do good constructions, most pollution, the areas that we were not going to be able to do any produce into the lands.
Yes, and so this map is particularly of the Tower District, which is this neighborhood where that is close to us. We're not in it now. Now we're downtown, but it's pretty close to us. Some people took the bus tour there, and as you can see, there's some yellow there. This map was given to lenders and financial institutions as a guideline as to which loans to approve and which loans to deny according to people race. And the language was by no means ambiguous. It was like blacks here, whites here, Armenian, we have a big Armenian population here, Armenians here, Latino people or Mexican, I think Mexican was the language they used. And so you can see the west side is red. So those are like the more risky loans. And then that white line that goes through that yellow area, at first we have the South Tower neighborhood kind of outlined there. It's a little hard to see. Oh, I have a pointer. Oh, this is the South Tower neighborhood here. And this here is the 180 freeway. So they decided, where should we put a freeway so people can drive their cars with all their pollution and noise? Oh, how about here in this area of the people that we don't care that much about? And so the 180 freeway has been described as a scar in our neighborhood that left a lot of vacant lots or like awkwardly shaped empty lots. And what the South Tower CLT is trying to do is repair that scar. And one way that we're doing that is by purchasing some of those lots and turning them into community farms or beautifying. There's already a park in one of those. And so some of you might have seen the triangle near the 180. That is also South Tower CLT property. Oh, also, we have a couple more points there. Food desert, we don't have a lot of grocery stores with fresh produce around. We have a lot of liquor stores and smoke shops and things like that. And slumlords are able to now go into some of these neighborhoods and buy those houses and apartment buildings or multi-units to charge a lot of money and fix nothing. And it's an area also more impacted by fires. This is us when we got the keys to the first South Tower CLT house that was purchased. This house is actually down the street from my house. I saw some of you over there at the tour. I didn't join a tour. I just went home and I was like, oh, there's a bus right here, right next to my house. And I just walked down. So in that blue house that you see sort of next to it right there is also CLT property. So the idea there is to have two houses and do an ADU development behind each house and have sort of a shared courtyard. So that's what Shakina was talking about, of having a like clustered CLT residences so that we can start to begin building community and driving resident engagement by actual geographical proximity. So I think we have sort of a unique opportunity here and in all of Fresno, because having lived in different areas of California, I see here that home ownership is a little more attainable, at least for us, for our family has been. And these kind of opportunities tend to pop up a little more often than maybe in other places. So here are some of the services from South Tower CLT. ADU development service to add more housing to already existing houses that may not be using all the space that they have. In policy, TOPA COPA, that's the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act or Community Opportunity to Purchase Act. So if there is a person that's renting a house and the landlord wants to sell it, that it would be first offered to the people who have already paid all the rent in that house. We don't have TOPA here, but my family is sort of an example of that because we were renting our house and we just got kicked out because the landlord wanted to sell it and we happened to be in a position to buy that house. And so that's how we got the house that's near that house right there. Then we also have the Queer Housing Summit. I have a shirt from this year's gathering. It's just a gathering about how to keep queer people housed and just it's open to a lot of other topics about housing and affordability and safety and what we mean by our community being safe and thriving. And there's our first and second acquisitions, which are these two houses and cottage developments that might be coming soon. Some of the long-term goals that we have is to have a long-term trust. And I'm part of a group called 559 Co-Living, which is trying to come up with an intergenerational co-living experience. We started sort of like, oh, let's do co-housing, like let's have a new building and it's gonna be beautiful. And then we realized that in our community, there is a lot of beautiful, amazing existing structures that we can use to do our co-housing projects. So we switched to a more co-living label, which is, we don't necessarily all live in the same complex, but we find ways to share resources and mutual aid within a community that might be in together sites and scattered sites. And as Kyle mentioned in the tour, we have the Beyond Land acknowledgement. So every time that a house is separated from the land that it's on, so the land will go on a 99-year land lease, as Shakina was explaining, and the building will be sold to qualifying family or person. And every time we do that, 10% of the value of the home is donated to an organization that drives tribal or Native American communities or agencies or organizations. So the first one for this particular house was called Turtle Lodge, and it's a drug and rehab for focus on the Native American community.
I just wanted to say one more thing in case some people don't know that 99-year lease and single family homeownerships particularly and specifically is inheritable and families do gain equity. So that has come up a couple times. I've heard, some people who are learning. I'm not going to speak to how it works with tenancy and multi-unit and stuff because I don't know. But I do know ownership provides, it's all the benefits and, by the way, responsibilities of ownership, because that includes taxes and maintenance. The only thing that separates us from our neighbor across the street is our mortgage is affordable, honest to goodness. And that's a really important piece, that it's inheritable, you get equity, those pieces really do matter.
So I'm here to talk about Trust South LA, which is a little bit different from South Tower CLT and Oak CLT in that we currently don't have any single family homes, and we really are focused on multi-family housing in South LA. But really, when we were founded in 2005, we were called the Rivera Corridor Community Land Trust because our group was really focused on the area between kind of immediately around the University of Southern California, but also between the University of Southern California and downtown Los Angeles. Because at that point, there was a lot of investment and redevelopment being planned, and a lot of people were being displaced. So there was, I can't remember what the coalition or what the like broader organization was called, but we were actually founded by a group of señoras who went on a trip to Dudley Street and were like, we want that here. We need that here. So we actually started off focusing in that area around USC, and then kind of as we had more members, as we got more people involved with Trust South LA, we realized that a lot of our membership was actually coming from further down South LA, which caused us to expand our boundaries, caused us to really focus on other parts of South Los Angeles. And that's actually when we changed our name. So our name, or Trust South LA, is an acronym for Tenemos que reclamar y unidos salvar la tierra, which means we must reclaim and together save the land. So really, we've been focusing, or at that like initial period, we had focused on the things that members were bringing to us. So those included a couple of campaigns that were like really long, and one of them kind of fell through. And so we didn't actually get our first property, I think, until 2000. The fight happened from like 2008 to like 2012, I think. And then after that, we had our first property, which was redeveloped from 40 units to 140 units. I think we'll have a picture later. But that really was like a lot of the first 10 years. We're coming up on our 20th year anniversary. So that really was a lot of the beginning of the land trust. But then after that, in 2016, we acquired our first multifamily property. And then during the pandemic, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, that was when we really grew. We acquired 2 other buildings. All of that is on the next slide. Let me get through this one. So we have a 12-person board with the tripartite structure. Right now, we currently have 3 leasee board members, and we have 1 leasee seat unfilled. Our terms are for 3 years. So we're really hoping that we can get that last leasee seat filled in 2026. And that's our beautiful board and staff. Yes, okay. So one of the other things that was a result of us being kind of formed as part of, or coming out of this other organization, is that we've always had a very big focus, not just on the land trust, but on programs. So originally, we did a lot of mobility justice work because in South LA, I mean, everybody knows that cars are like dominant in South Los Angeles, but or in Los Angeles, but in South Los Angeles, you have a lot of people who can't afford a car and who are riding their bikes everywhere. And a lot of our membership came from that. So we've always had a really big like mobility justice kind of program going on, which has kind of turned into an environmental justice like department within the organization. We obviously have the CLT, which is another department. And then we have our policy and membership. And then I put programs there because sometimes we just do things. Sometimes we just like have things that are going on and they don't really fit into anything else. But yes, so the anti-displacement campaign that I had mentioned earlier, that was really our first big victory. And that was actually like Section 8 housing that was saved because the landlord wanted to turn it into student housing for USC students. And the residents actually came to us, which is like, I wasn't here for any of this, but I've read all of the things. It was incredible. And yes, so that property was actually co-developed with Abode Communities. So they take on basically all of the stewardship for that property. So directly we steward 11 households, 11 units. But another thing that was mentioned was that CLTs acquire properties at different states and in different forms. And at all three of those properties that we directly oversee, we actually acquired without engaging the tenants, really, without we had the money. The properties were in neighborhoods where we were scared that they were going to be sold on the market. And we really focus on doing the work once we have the buildings, which, you know. But we are working with those households because we do eventually want to turn those properties into co-ops. If I have another slide. No, I don't. Okay. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say.
You had one. One more thing.
One more thing. I wanted to encourage people, we talk about language justice, and I want to encourage people, especially if you're in the multi-family, multi-unit development process, to start referring to your residents, both current and future, as residents, not tenants. There's a huge difference. You may have tenants who are residents, but you also may have residents who are not tenants, like my husband and myself. But if we're talking about building community and engaging our residents, which is the focus of this workshop, you want to use the language residents. It is empowering. Tenants is not empowering, in my opinion. So just a little bug in your ear.
Like we mentioned, we want to leave space just for some like speed round if there's any burning questions for the presenters on what they shared. And then we really want to leave time for a breakout. So just like 5 minutes max. I saw a hand over here. Gonna pass you the mic because we want to make sure we catch it on our Zoom recording.
Oakland CLT mentioned having about 150 residents, and Trust South LA mentioned having about 140 households. I was wondering, like, what's the engagement, like the percentage of people that are engaged in like regular meetings from those either units or residents?
Get a second.
Yeah, so the 140 units that I mentioned was from that big redevelopment that we co-developed with Abode Communities. We last year we had, I think, monthly tenant meetings. The Abode Communities does also have their resident meetings. I'm so sorry, resident meetings. They were kind enough to let us like go in and do our own meetings, but I don't know, it was not very well attended. And from what I understand, like the resident meetings, the ones run by Abode are also not very well attended. Like I mentioned, it's a different relationship, so we don't have the same access in that building that we do at the three properties that we directly steward. That's something that we have talked to Abode about and we are trying to change. But it is a little bit difficult because we do have those other three properties and we really are focusing on the day-to-day stuff with them as well as the monthly meetings. Was that all your question? Am I missing anything? So the question is, what is the percentage of participation at the three buildings that we do directly steward? Everybody shows up to the resident meetings. Everybody shows up to the meetings that are, right there on their property. We do also have like Trust South LA member meetings. And then the participation there is like a little bit less consistent. We've had at least a couple people from each of the properties attend those, but really the majority of resident engagement happens at the meetings that are on their property. And then you also had a question?
To specifically answer your question about Oakland, it really depends on which type of residence and properties you're talking about. So as a single family homeowner, I'm not directly involved in the multi-unit side of things, except as a board member and knowing kind of what's going on at a big picture there. And I know in the multi-unit buildings, they have kind of their own internal gatherings and meetings, and they're, you know, depending on the unit, more or less attended pretty well, depending on what's going on. At the single family home level and residents as a whole, we have to separate out pre-COVID and COVID. So pre-COVID, we had monthly meetings that, you know, were fairly well attended. Not 150 people attended, but we probably had, I don't know, we had less than 150 families too, but we probably had, I don't know, 50-ish people showing up fairly regularly. Then we went into Zoom meetings and we had a good amount of people showing up for a minute, and then everything fell apart and has never really recovered. So that is part of what we're trying to figure out, is how do we re-engage, particularly the single family home residents. And again, not all of our single family home residents are homeowners. We do have some tenants in single family homes because we've acquired those properties over time. So we're trying to figure that out. Percentage, I don't know, but abysmal.
Yeah, I guess my question is actually, maybe it's a more of a breakout question, but I kind of wanted to see anyone in the room, if you have a sense of, you know, we just acquired our first property and we're, you know, in the process of having residents referred to us through a community partner. And we're trying to figure out how do we, I mean, obviously we can set expectations around engagement, but like what is actually fair to ask of residents in terms of the level of engagement? Like, you know, our population is going to be formerly unhoused families and we don't want to burden them, but we also, you know, want to have this be a resident driven community to whatever extent is possible. So I'm curious from like people in the room, if anyone has, yeah, thoughts on how they set expectations, and also just like what, you know, what are the things that they feel like are required, and what do they think, you know, would be nice, I guess. And maybe the answer is like nothing is actually required and we just let people live their lives and we manage their housing for them. I don't know. I'm just curious.
Perfect segue that fits into one of the questions that we actually have for our breakouts, in a way. So I'm gonna invite that one to be a part of that group. We're question number, oh, maybe it's on number 3. I was gonna have y'all read them out, but maybe I'll read them out so we can go into our breakouts. We have about 4 spaces. I know there's more than 4 tables, so we're kind of gonna just, you know, move around. We'll have question number 1 be over here, and this is one that Shania will be facilitating. And these are questions that are coming from presenters. Like we said, we really want to learn from you all. So for more established CLTs, what is one thing you wish you could go back to redo when it comes to resident engagement infrastructure? So that'll be table question 1 with Shania over here. Question 2, how do you sustain participation and engagement without over relying on the most engaged residents? This one has multiple questions. How have you encouraged and or involved your residents to be on and interact with your board of directors? That will be Shakina back there. Maybe where Maribel is at? Maribel. Will be question 2. And then question 3 is from Gabby. How do we as CLT sustain deepen trust after moments of crisis? For example, the pandemic, the wildfires in LA, the current raids. And how do we transform this heightened willingness to engage into real commitment? So there's folks that during these times, you know, there's a lot going on, mutual aid's popping up, and folks are ready to get in, but how do we then sustain that after the crisis? And then we have a floater. Sorry, number 3, where do you want to be? Over here? Okay, in this corner, question number 3. And then we did want to leave space for if there is a theme or question. And if you proposed the question already, if that one doesn't fit into number 2, we can also create a space over here for the question that you posed. Or maybe number 3. So is it good? We'll give you a butcher paper. Is it good if you help facilitate that question? We'll put that one over there. And if there's another one that doesn't, again, fit into any of these 4 now, we can create another space. We'll find space in this space. I'm gonna do the whole clap thing. Clap once if you can hear me. Clap twice if you can hear me. All right, y'all. I know I'm excited. Lively conversations. Definitely encourage y'all to continue either in pairs or bring your whole group with you to lunch. We are right before lunch, so this can definitely continue there. But we do want to leave some time for just quick report backs and get you out of here by 12:30. If you didn't get a chance to write your idea down, put it on a Post-it note. I'm gonna be snapping photos and what do you call it? Transcribing. You ready to go? All right. If I can get the attention again. Team number. Yes. Our interpreter needs to focus on 1. Thank you. All righty. This is question
1. We were talking about for more established CLTs, what is one thing you wish you could go back to redo when it comes to resident infrastructure? We were a mix of CLTs that had more experience and some that had no experience with like residents living in their buildings. So the main themes we had, a big one was educate, some sort of educational curriculum that is ongoing with residents, especially when the CLT and the residents first connect, whether that's through resident organizing or the CLT acquiring the building. Without the organizing, definitely you need like this infusion of educational content, and that builds rapport with the residents and also brings them into like CLT model and understanding that. And we talked about financial education, like going through the pro forma for the building, and that sort of like creates this buy-in as well, so that people understand the stakes of building in like a financially healthy way. And also that in our experience at NCLT, Northern California Land Trust, like it is helpful to have financial education for like residents for their own purposes. So that can kind of go together. We talked about one. I don't know how much time I have either. So okay. One other thing was like there's a dynamic at NCLT and I think at other CLTs as well, that there is a difference in engagement between renters and owners, and bringing in the renters is sometimes more difficult for a variety of reasons, or it's difficult or it just doesn't happen. So being really intentional about like making meetings like super accessible and asking people what they need or what they're interested in participating in, super important and can get overlooked.
Okay, the question was, what should we expect from meetings? What structure should be established? Especially in the context of having residents coming out of homelessness and living in the survival mode. And so we talked about having learning conversations, building relationships first. Talking about shared values and principles that the residents can align with. What do we do when no one wants to?
how do we sustain participation and engagement without over relying on the most engaged residents? How have you encouraged or involved your residents to be interact with your board? I think that we got a lot of ideas up here, and I think the big picture is try a lot of things. And summary, some of them are financial related. Financially invest in removing barriers, whether that's education, stipends, childcare, meal, all of these things can help people try different communication methods, not just emails, but call people, text people, knock on doors, check in on folks that haven't showed up. Do fun things, make your meetings exciting, not just like here, listen to the report, but like if they're an activity, how are people involved? What are you creating together? Raffles, make cultural exchanges with language, foods, cultural activities that you do. So that's kind of the big picture.
Okay, so our question was, how do we as CLTs sustain deepen trust after moments of crisis, and how do we transform this heightened willingness to engage into real commitment? We had like half of the conversation was about this, and then we started talking really about like what you could do at one specific building. So just to go through what we mentioned to answer the question. One of the first things was to involve residents in decision making. For example, painting. But it could really go very much beyond that. Like wherever you have an opportunity to take into account residents' opinion, or wherever you have the opportunity to like, I'm thinking about leases. Like if you can work through the lease with your residents and they have real input into that. Like for example, one of our properties has like you can party on the weekend. You can't party during the week. So things like that, right? Where people are really coming to a decision together. Yeah, the more decisions people make, the more decisions people want to make. And that just means that you're like, okay, you have to get involved. Like if you want this, like come to the next meeting, do X, and then also being upfront about the CLT's mission and intention from the beginning, because a lot of people have really traumatic experiences with landlords. A lot of people have like a lot of stuff that they're carrying from like being evicted or being close to eviction or not being able to like pay rent. All of these things, like whether or not we want it to, it all affects us, right? So really coming to folks with like the idea that we are trying to stabilize you, that we are here to support you, that we are here to do what we can to make housing better for everybody in your neighborhood, right? But really the second half of our conversation was really about Savannah from Asian Pacific Self-Development and Resident Associations building, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a moment of crisis, really, really, like terrible. There was a shooting, right, that really like spurred a lot of the engagement that started at that property, and really kind of creating a community with that property from that moment of crisis, like engaging people to work on the property, to like actually be hired by the association, to actually feel invested in their property, right? So some of the examples you mentioned were like the resident manager was hired from the tenants. And then you guys also like they also redeveloped a few of the units in the communities. Oh yes, the community garden too, which is something that came from the residents, right? So we really went from this idea of like
how do we sustain to like what does it look like in an actual property, right? Like what does an ecosystem of real commitment from everybody um, like what does that make possible at a property, right? Yeah, that was our conversation. Thank y'all. We are only over, so yay! That's part of also resident engagement, keeping them not too long over. Continue your conversations during lunch. Thank you again to our speakers and to all of y'all for sharing